Bless our God today. We are excited to be in the house of the Lord. Well, come on with us, journey with us, the book of 1 Samuel. Once again, thank you for those that prayed us through this week. I hope and pray that I represented God, number one, but you, number two, well at the Hamptons Ministers Conference. And my phone has not stopped ringing. I was told you shouldn't preach this Sunday. You're right, I'm tired, but man, I love preaching. So we're going to share what we can today and ask God to breathe upon it. Also, thank you for those that came out on this past Friday. What an experience with Kirk Franklin in the house. Did y'all have a good time? Whoever showed up, y'all have a good time? Cool. We try to do some incredible stuff because we want to make sure that you feel, just experience some things you probably never experienced before. So that's good. Thank you for the team and staff, everyone who served. Everyone was on it, 10-star, and we really appreciate each of you so much. 1 Samuel chapter 17, familiar passage of scripture. And it's my simple aim today to hopefully just talk through this story we all know so well. Hopefully we can find some nuances and nuggets to share on today. 1 Samuel chapter 17, just a couple of verses out of that chapter, verse 32, and then we'll mosey on down to verse 45 and conclude at verse 51. I'm reading from the Message translation, but as long as your book says Bible, you are absolutely fine. Here is the word of God. Verse 32 says this: Master, said David, don't give up hope. I'm ready to go and fight this Philistine. Going down to verse 45, David answered, you come to me with sword and spear and battle axe. I come at you in the name of God of the angel armies, the God of Israel's troops, who you curse and mock. This very day God is handing you over to me. I'm about to kill you, cut off your head, serve up your body and the bodies of your Philistine buddies to the crows and coyotes. The whole earth will know that there's an extraordinary God in Israel. And everyone gathered here will learn that God doesn't save by means of sword or spear. The battle belongs to God. He's handing you to us on a platter. That roused the Philistine, and he started toward David. David took off from the front line, running toward the Philistine. David reached into his pocket for a stone, slung it, and hit the Philistine hard in the forehead, bedding the stone deeply. The Philistine crashed face down in the dirt. That's how David beat the Philistine, with a sling and a stone. He hit him and killed him. No sword for David. Then David ran up to the Philistine and stood over him, pulled the giant's sword from his sheath, and finished the job by cutting off his head. And when the Philistines saw that their great champion was dead, they scattered, running for their lives. Once again, look at verse 32. It's what starts in this conversation, David, with Saul. Master, said David, don't give up hope. I'm ready to go and fight this Philistine. For the time which is ours, I simply want to preach as we continue this series, After God's Own Heart. I want to talk about it's not a fair fight. Touch someone next to you, say, neighbor, it's not a fair fight. It's not a fair fight. Lift those hands toward heaven and say, Lord, speak. We need to hear. You may be seated in the presence of our God. The adage is true, giants do fall. And when we speak about giants, as we begin to explore it in further detail, and hopefully today will once again allow us to illuminate ourselves intellectually and spiritually as we go through what is an important episode in the life of David, what I want you to also understand foundationally is that giants are anything. It's any strong or formidable opponent that you may face. Giants come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Giants can be physical, but giants can also be mental. Giants can be emotional. All of us oftentimes will face our fair share of giants. But here's the reality for most of us is that we've allowed what we perceive our giants to be, how large they are, to perhaps make us think that we do not have a chance going against our giants. And if we're not careful, we'll allow the giants of life to cause us to lose hope, to lose faith, to lose trust. And even before the battle begins, you have made up your mind, it's not worth it for me to fight. And that's what this story, as we go into 1 Samuel 17, as we are journeying with David all this summer. We have already talked about how God sovereignly selected him from the pasture, how when there was time for a new king to be lifted up, Samuel went with the oil flask to the house of Jesse, He found there, even though Jesse, the father, did not even consider his youngest son king worthy, it was in that moment in 1 Samuel 16 that God elevates and lifts up David to be the new king of Israel. What's interesting is when the text closes in 1 Samuel 16, even though he is anointed to be the next king, he goes right back outside and he's handling the sheep in his father's house. When we get to 1 Samuel 17, that's what takes place. In essence, Israel is now facing its mortal enemy, the Philistines. What we see here, and when you read this chapter, is you see two nations gridlock, Israel on one side and Philistines on the other. What happens in our text, you know this story. If you spend any time in Sunday school or vacation Bible school, you know what took place. At that moment, Goliath, this giant of a man from Philistine, made his taunts and his threats against the children of Israel. What I love about this text is when we concluded in this chapter, what we see is this young shepherd boy still smelling like the anointing oil that was poured upon his head. What we see him is he embraces this opportunity to go ahead and fight the giant by the name of Goliath. And by the time the battle is over, Goliath's head has been cut off, Israel has won, and God has been glorified. But none of that would take place, Deacon Prince. None of that would happen if at first of all, David did not believe that he was ready mentally and physically and yes, spiritually. What I'm submitting to you today, that what I appreciate about this passage is that David knew before the battle begun, this is not a fair fight. And I don't know who I come to help today. I'm not sure where you are in your journey. I'm not sure what you're having to face. I'm unsure the giants that seem to be looking overbearing in your life. But I come with good news to let you know, no matter how large your giants may seem, they can still be overcome. Here he is, the simple thing I need you to get today. And I promise I won't stand before you long. But this is all I've come to deposit in your spirit, is that many times the real reality is that you've got to know before the battle begins that I've already got the victory. Here it is. You cannot defeat what you're not willing to face. And I've come to tell you that's the simple message of this text, is that what we learn here is that when our giants, when they come up against us, we've got to know that we are not fighting them on our own. When we are confronting and facing our giants, guess what? Here's the good news. You got God on your side. And as long as you got God on your side, it does not matter what comes your way. It doesn't matter how large the giant may seem, how threatening the giant may be. Somebody can testify, if God be for you, He's more than the world that is against you. And that's the powerful thing I want you to know. Here's your life takeaway principle today, is that that giants cannot stand up against your God. That's what I simply want to suggest to you today. I'm not going to be andering long through this text. There's a few principles I want to outline that I think this text is tailored to teach us as we look at this perspective. I know this is a known narrative. You know the story of David and Goliath, but let me share what I believe are some nuances of some interesting angles in this text, and hopefully we can spend a little time realizing that no matter what battle I go in, as long as I got God, it is not a fair fight. Here's the first thing I'm going to give to you now. Some of my principles are a little verbose, so I need y'all to they're going to keep them on the screen a little long because I want to make sure you write all of them down. These are going to be your marching orders this week. These are going to be the principles I hope that you allow to guide you throughout your week as you face giants. And one thing I want you to understand is that David teaches us a couple of things about how he walked into this battle against Goliath. Here it is, my brother and sister. First thing I want you to jot down, first thing I need you to really consider when it comes to us taking on our giants, is that David teaches us you got to have a willingness to step up in the gaps of opportunity left by others. What I'm suggesting here is that if you're going to defeat your giants, you got to be, first of all, willing to fight your giants. As I told you before, and you read 1 Samuel chapter 17, the narrative is all about this standstill that's taking place, Deacon Brown, between the nation of Israel on one side and the Philistines on the other. This is a classic battle of territory. Philistines are seafaring people, and as you begin to note, as Israel begins to try its best to migrate in the promised land, one thing that happens is that the Philistines and Israel began to argue over the same land. This is literally territorial battles that we are seeing in the Old Testament. And what takes place is now these two armies are facing one another. And something takes place. The Philistines send out their largest and greatest soldier, a giant by the name of Goliath. When you read the text, you'll note the first few verses of chapter 17 tells us that this giant comes out and for 40 straight days continues to taunt the children of Israel. He walks out there. Matter of fact, 1 Samuel chapter 17 gives the description of Goliath. He's about 9 feet tall. His armor weighs over 100 some pounds. He has an armor bearer in front. His helmet, his shin guards, everything about Goliath is large. And for 40 straight days, early in the morning, he gets up and he taunts the nation of Israel. He literally says, bring out your best. There's no need for us losing much life. We'll have a one-on-one battle, a mano-a-mano battle. Whoever wins between me and your best soldier, watch this, will win this war. We're going to just have it out. Whoever you send my way, if they defeat me, you win, but I'm going to defeat them, and we're going to show you that we have over 40 straight days. Goliath does this. This was not something that just happened overnight, but for 40 straight days. This Goliath kept taunting the people of Israel. 40 straight days, Goliath kept trying to be menacing and threatening to Goliath. And here is the reality. The giant Goliath was not going to stop threatening Israel until somebody was willing to fight. See, that's what I want to tell you, because I think what we learn in this text, Brother Prince, is your giants will never leave you alone. I wish I could tell you that you could just sit idly by and just sit on the sideline and just expect for some giants to just pass away. But what we learn in the text is some giants are going to always be there until somebody has the courage to step up. You're going to catch what I'm saying, because I know you've been hoping and praying, well, perhaps my giant will get tired. Perhaps my giant will get fatigued. But what we learn in the text is that what we see is that giants will never go away until someone has the courage and confidence to be able to face them. I want you to know that giant that you're wrestling with, until you have the courage to engage it, it will always be there. Don't think you can wish your giant away. Don't think you can hope your giant away. Your giant is going to continue to torment you and terrorize you until you get the courage to step up. And that's what happens. No one in Israel was willing to step up. Matter of fact, what takes place is interesting, because David was not even initially on the battlefield. He was tending his sheep of his father when his dad decided to send him to the enemy lines to carry lunch for his older brother. You know the story. He goes down and he's carrying his lunch. And by the time he gets to the Israelite army, he hears all of them talking. Matter of fact, he comes at the right time to hear Goliath continuing to taunt the children of Israel. And everybody in Israel's camp, including the king, was scared. All of them kept talking about, well, we can't fight this giant. But Saul said, if anyone steps up and defeats him, Saul has promised that from there on point that person would have the hand of marriage of king's daughter. Their family, watch this, will be tax-free for their entire lives. And thirdly, he will make them a great wealth. Those are 3 promises. You read 1 Samuel 17. Matter of fact, King Saul was trying to bribe anybody. Please just go out there and fight Goliath. If you go out there and defeat him, you'll have my daughter's hand in marriage. You'll be royalty. I'll make your family tax-free for the rest of their lives. You ain't got to pay no more taxes at all. And I will give you great wealth. All you got to do is go defeat the giant. With all those great incentives, no one wanted to fight. With all that great perk package, I mean, come on, no taxes for the rest of your life? Y'all, excuse me, I mean, no taxes. Plus they pay you, and you get married to the king's daughter on top of that. He thought he could put the best benefit package in place, but nobody was willing to step up. They were too afraid, because to them, it was not worth it to engage in battle with the giant. And their fear and apprehension caused this gap to be opened that no one was willing to step up in. Matter of fact, that's what I appreciate about David, because when David gets word, the Bible tells us they escort him to King Saul, and verse 32 tells us he tells King Saul, I'll fight the giant. Now what gets me is around this time his brother gets word about David, and he gets mad, pulls him aside, said, there you go showing off again. There you go trying to be big boy, and you ain't nothing but a shepherd boy. There you go thinking that you can fight some giant. Here's my issue with the brother who's mad at David. Why are you mad at David that David decided to step up when you wouldn't step up? If I had time, if y'all look like y'all want to hear some preaching today, I would tell you, be mindful of people who will try to talk you out of stuff they weren't even willing to do themselves. Be mindful of people who always want to criticize you for taking a bold step when they weren't willing to do it themselves. Be mindful of people who mad at you because now you deciding to go back to school, but they never had the initiative themselves. Be mindful of people who always try to tell you what you should and shouldn't do, but haven't shown enough initiative in their own. Y'all excuse me, but I feel like if you're going to critique me, you at least got to be willing to show some initiative. I'm afraid of people who always trying to critique something and they're not willing to do it themselves. It's easy to sit on the sideline and talk about what you would and wouldn't do, but at this point in my life, Deacon Brown, I've come to the place that if you ain't out there trying to fight, if you ain't out there ain't got no courage, if you ain't got nothing about yourself, you can't say nothing to me, because I'm out there trying to make it do. I wish I had somebody that can testify. At some point, you shouldn't let people discourage you when they don't have the same wherewithal that you have. You can't do it. And I don't know who I come to talk to, but at some point, you got to make up your mind to step up. Don't allow other people's fear to thwart your faith. At some point, just because they wouldn't do it don't mean that it can't be done. Just because they couldn't conceptualize it don't mean that it can't be done. And woe be unto us if we become beholden and prisoners to other people's limitation. At some point, child of God, you got to have enough belief in yourself that if don't nobody else can make this thing happen, they ain't seen me yet. Just because everybody else is afraid don't mean that it can't be done. Just because other people are in the prison of their limitations, you do not allow them to stop you from stepping up. I wish I had time. And at some point, David shows us that many times you've got to move in the gap of the opportunity. Do not allow other people's opinions or other people's limited mindsets to stop you from stepping up when you know what you can do. That's what he says, is you got to have a willingness to step up in the gap of opportunity left by others. Then there's something else that perhaps we can take this narrative a little further, because also what we see here, how David takes on this giant, is he lets us know that we got to be confident that your developmental experiences have prepared you for this moment. In other words, what I'm saying to you is that when you look back over your life, you realize everything God allowed you to make it through was helping to develop you to be bold and victorious in that moment. That's because it's a simple thing, guys, that when they asked David, how do you think you can fight this giant? David's reply is, I've handled lions and I've handled bears, so this giant shouldn't be a problem. I will admit to you, I was really meditating on this within the moments that I had to spare this week. So I was getting my mind ready, not just to preach at Hampton, but also prepare for this weekend. And I will admit to you, I think that we oftentimes view this text, the people that David and the entities that David said he has already defeated, as if lions and bears are easy enemies. For some reason, we've assumed that lions and bears really have no shot against a giant. But I can make the argument that lions and bears are harder to defeat than giants. Get a chance, you should read an interesting book by Malcolm Gladwell entitled David and Goliath, where he makes the argument premise that David was not the underdog in the fight. He says that really honestly, when you study the mannerisms of Goliath in the text, that what you note is that perhaps he was struck with the disease of a tumor on his pituitary gland that had forced him to grow larger than his mind and body could handle. That literally he was slow, he was blind, he needed the other stuff to look menacing because in essence he was not as agile of an adversary that could really honestly do much deal on the battlefield. But on the other hand, lions and bears are some of the top predators in the animal kingdom. Lions with their stealth approach, with their strong jaws. Lions with their claws, if they were able to get their hands on you, could literally rip a human being to shreds. Most people don't even realize that bears are the strongest animals in the world. So when David says, I've already faced a lion and defeated them. I've already faced bears and defeated them. When they came and tried to get my little sheep, I stood strong against these formidable and agile foes. And since I've been able to handle lions and bears, I know this giant ain't gonna be hard. Y'all gonna catch this. See, here's the thing. What I appreciate about the text, and what most of us don't understand, is that you don't know God's been developing you the whole time. God had already sneaked a preview of your future and knew what you was going to have to handle. So guess what God was doing? He was preparing you every step of the way, which means God was sending lions and God was sending bears because he knew there was going to be a giant in your future. And if you can defeat a lion and if you can defeat a bear, then you know to yourself that giants, and I wish I had somebody here, that the reason you are confident and bold and the reason why you not afraid of some giant is because of some stuff you have already survived. When you look back over your life and seeing how far the Lord has brought you, you're looking at your future and looking at your giant talking about, I done survived some stuff. See, there's a certain mentality and swagger that survivors have. That's why some people are scared, because you've never been through nothing. But if you've been through something in your life, if you've overcome some things in your life, if you had some battles that you made it out of, there's something about going through some stuff that allows you to mature and grow and have a confidence in God that this way the same God that brought me through yesterday is the same God that can bring me through today. Do I got any survivors in the house that have overcome some stuff? That's why you walk around with your head held high and your chest up, and folk trying to call you bougie. You ain't bougie, you blessed, because you know what God has did in your life. And when you know what God has done in your life, you walk understanding if God did it before, I'm just crazy enough to believe that he can do it. High by somebody next to you and say, neighbor, I done survived some stuff. I done managed and handled lions and bears, and because I got through that, I believe God can help me through this. I love that, because every day God is developing you. God has each of us in the weight room of development. He knows what weight he eventually wants to get you to. So he'll keep putting weight on, and while you're struggling and mad, you're just getting stronger. While you're going through, God is just developing you to be mightier. While you're going through, that's why some of you don't even realize how strong you really are. That's why some of you don't understand, because oftentimes God's greatest workout plan is not when God blesses you, it's when God burdens you. When God is able to put weight on you and struggle and strain and pain, is God just making you. I wish I had somebody. I wish I could have somebody that can shout. This is going to be weird, that you can shout over the lions and bears that you made. I need some folk. I know that's weird to say because we don't like to shout over those things, but I thank God for every adversary. I thank God for every enemy. I thank God for every situation. Why? Because it made me as strong as I am right now. That's the text. Got to have a willingness to step up. The gaps of opportunity left by others. You got to be confident that your developmental experiences have prepared you for this moment. But here's the third thing, and I bid you to do. Watch this. You got to know being true to self stabilizes you to overcome whatever giants you have to face. Here's the tendency, because the text tells us when David had accepted assignment, Saul, king of Israel, leader of the army, does what most people try to do to you when they're not willing to do what you're willing to do. Saul says, put on my armor. Put on my gear. Put on the weaponry I think is the most effective in this battle. And text tells us that David puts it on, but realizes this armor don't fit me. This armor don't fit me. If I had time and pause there, I would say, my thing to Saul, if the victory was in the armor, Saul, why didn't you put it on and fight Goliath? I know y'all don't have that, but I have a lot of people in this stage of my life who want to outfit me with their armor. And at some point, I made up my mind that if I'm going to fight, I'm going to fight my way. Y'all going to help me here. If I'm going to lose and fail, I'm going to fail being me. Because watch this, if I win being you, then I owe you. But if I win being me, all glory belongs to God. Here it is. This is the point that gets me, and it's crazy. So he decides to not take Saul's armor. Text says something strange, because I know y'all know the end of this story. But I would tell you what really gets me is something in my reading this week that I have glossed over for years. I thought I knew the story of David and Goliath. Because you know it. He goes to a brook, picks up 5 stones, slings the sling, and hits Goliath in the forehead so hard that he hits the ground. He runs over, cuts his head off. But man, there was something in the text that I always have glossed over, because I always assumed it was just David and his slingshot. But the text does not say he goes out there with just his slingshot. The Bible says David, with his staff in hand, picks up 5 stones and runs to battle with his sling. I ain't gonna front, guys. I've always assumed that David was just out there with his slingshot. But the text is clear that he had a staff in his hand. So he had a staff and a slingshot to face Goliath. You can't shout over that because you forgot David's a shepherd. One of the main weapons and instruments of a shepherd is his staff. So he can't wear the armor of Saul because that's Saul. But he has to go out there in his authentic self. Which means even though I'm on the battlefield, I've got to take what I am comfortable with. The staff was one of the things that you knew a shepherd by. Staffs were important. Matter of fact, there was a couple things that they did. They were used for correcting. Whenever the sheep would get out of line, watch this, that they would use the staff to get the sheep back in line. Staff was a correcting instrument. But it was also not just a correcting instrument, it was a protecting instrument. Because on the other side, that was not a hook, was also what they considered the rod. It was a way to ward off adversaries. Perhaps this was the same staff that David used to fight off lions and bears. So staffs are correcting, staffs, watch this, are protecting, but there's another thing about the staff, is a staff is steadying. You needed a staff because in uneven terrain, you could sometimes lose your footing. And the staff was used there as a steadying instrument. Matter of fact, when I studied it, Reverend Z, I come to find out that some well-trained shepherds would oftentimes use the steadiness of the staff to give them more velocity on the swing. That their staff kept them stable in unstable times. Y'all gonna miss what I'm saying. So could it be that when he walks out, runs out against Goliath, he got a sling in one hand, but he knows I'm in uneven, unstable terrain. So let me take something with me that just in case my footing slips, just in case I get a little uneven, let me take something that I know is going to keep me standing in a place I've never been before. But because the staff has steadied me before, I believe it can keep me steady. I wish I had time. I know. You think that is one just on the slingshot, but the staff is what keeps you steady. Some of y'all got to understand that you wouldn't have the power in your sling if you didn't have the steadiness of your staff. You need something that can keep you. You need something that can hold you up. Do I got anybody that can look over life and say, that's why I can't take other people's stuff, because they don't know what it's going to take for me to be strong and still in this moment. But if I got my staff with me, if I got something to steady me, that it will keep me on my feet even in unstable times. I'm going, may the Lord bless you. But can I tell you, when the victory was really won, even before he got the 5 rocks, even before he took out his slingshot, even before he even walked with his staff, verse 40, take this, write this down, because let me tell you how and when David won the battle. It wasn't just the trust he had in God, but verse 40 said, when David approached the giant, oh, I'm done, because here it is. Let me tell you, your greatest weapon against your giant is your first step, which means at some point, child of God, you got to be willing to go pursue after what you believe God can give you victory. I'm done. May the Lord bless you real good. Thank y'all for indulging me this morning, but just lean over and nudge somebody and tell them, take that step. Learn how to get out of your comfort zone, because when you move towards the giant is when you give God permission to blow your mind. Do I got anybody here that said, I'm going to take the step, and when I take the step, watch God do the rest? Everyone standing. I'm done. Touch somebody close to you. Tell them, giants do fall. That's the wrong neighbor. They a little scared. Find you a good ride or die neighbor. Said, neighbor, I got good news today. Giants do, but they don't fall unless you're willing to fight. They don't fall unless you're willing to take the first step. They don't fall if you don't step up there and think that I can handle this with God on my side. All things are possible. I don't know what giant you're facing. I don't know what people have told you cannot be conquered. But I love David in our text, because David shows us is, man, if you got confidence in God, there's no giant that can step up to you. And if you're here today, and perhaps that's where we are as we extend the invitation, first of all, I want to just pray.